All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I think I might as well get started here. My name is David Dubczak. I teach 7th and 8th grade computer science at Indianola Middle School, which is just south of Des Moines, Iowa. And let's do the little informal poll here. Who is elementary teachers in here? Okay, middle school teachers. Let's do middle school. High school. Administration. Only one, thank goodness. Okay. And anyone else? Others, a couple others. Okay. Well, welcome. I'm also about a month away from finishing my master's in education at Iowa State University, and so I'm about to give you an introduction to the world that I've been living in for the past couple of years here. Also, need to give you our NETA clue. Our NETA clue, I don't have any way to put this up on the slide, but it's exhibit hall. Those of you who are keeping track, it's just a picture of the exhibit hall, and it says the word exhibit hall on it. So I will leave this up here if anyone wants to see it after our presentation here. I'm going to give you a presentation today that's part motivational speech, part research, part action plan, and part musings from a guy who just likes to sit and think about this a lot. So, and a little bit more about me too. Away from education, I run a small video production company, and instructional design consulting is also what I do outside of the world of education. Now, me personally, to let you know about me, I am a SpaceX fanboy. Anyone familiar with this company, SpaceX? Okay, I am a SpaceX fanboy. I love anything to do with rocket science and aerospace engineering and rockets and astronomy and space. I love anything to do with that. In fact, I was really excited earlier this month when SpaceX launched what was called the Demonstration Mission 1 of a new spacecraft called the Crew Dragon to the International Space Station. Eventually, this will carry astronauts to the International Space Station, something we haven't been able to do in, as of yesterday, 2,819 days. I've been keeping track in my classroom. That's how much of a SpaceX fanboy I am. How much of a SpaceX fanboy am I? I went to space camp as an adult. So did a bunch of other people. But I'm pretty sure they all looked at me and they're like, oh, this guy is crazy. But anyway, SpaceX has an audacious goal. They want to make rockets reusable. In all of the history of space travel, rockets have been one-time use vehicles. They have gone up, delivered their payload into orbit, come back down, fallen in the ocean or the desert, and been discarded. In fact, this is one of the engines that carried the Apollo 11 mission to the moon, only recently recovered from the bottom of the ocean. In fact, the space shuttle was intended to be reusable, but it never really achieved that goal. Every single flight, the orange external fuel tank was brand new. Every single flight, the 2 solid rocket boosters on the side were about 90% brand new, and the shuttle itself had to be almost completely refurbished every flight. So, SpaceX has an audacious goal. They like to compare it to air travel and say, how much more expensive would it be if airplanes were one-time use vehicles? If every single time you flew on an airplane, it was a brand new airplane, and when it landed, it was just thrown away. Not recycled, thrown away. How many of you think you would have ever ridden an airplane in your life if that would have been the case? Okay, can you imagine? We're talking about plane tickets that are in the upper 6 figures, maybe over $1 million per ticket, no matter where you're going. So SpaceX has an audacious goal. They built a rocket called the Falcon 9. Falcon 9, their goal is to give it a lifespan of 100 flights, and to be able to go 10 flights between refurbishment, even with a 24 hours between flights. So I really admire this company and their experienced professional rocket engineers. The best rocket engineers in the country. Right now, all over the country, at universities all over the country, freshman aerospace engineering majors are aspiring to be like the SpaceX engineers that built this. In December 15, SpaceX landed a rocket for the first time. But the process of getting there, they totally destroyed 6 rockets. Since this date, in learning to perfect this technology, they've lost 6 more rockets. So they're well on their way to achieving their goal, but it's taken an awful lot of failure to get there. So let's connect this to education right now. In the world of education right now, we very much live in an anti-failure culture. Okay, no child left behind, anyone. All right, we very much live in an anti-failure culture. If we see a student failing, we're supposed to swoop in and help. We're supposed to write intervention plans and add supports and all these different things. We're supposed to swoop in and help so that our students never have to fail. How many of you have seen this scene from the movie Apollo 13 played for you at a faculty meeting? In my time teaching, at least 3 times. And I'm not the one running the faculty meeting. Now, a little bit of truth behind this picture. So this is Ed Harris playing the flight director of the Apollo 13 mission, Gene Kranz. Gene Kranz, the real one, never actually said this in real life. He admits that much in his book, ironically called Failure is Not an Option, where he saw the movie and said, hey, that's a pretty good line. I should write a book. All right, back on topic. What happens is when the natural extension of this is we get something like this, where 31% of employers say that they have had parents applying for jobs on behalf of their adult children. We are doing whatever we can to make sure our students never have to fail. And if the professional rocket engineers at SpaceX can't keep their rockets from blowing up, why is it that we're trying to keep failure away from our students like kryptonite to Superman? Keep it away from them or they'll die. When really, if you work in an innovation industry, an industry that depends on research and development, what you'll find is that failure is sometimes bad, sometimes inevitable, and sometimes even good. Now I know what you might be thinking. Who is this sadist standing in the front of the room telling me that the best way to teach my kids is to throw them in the deep end and let them sink or swim? Because when the choice is to learn to swim or drown, you learn to swim pretty quickly, right? No. That's not what I'm saying. Okay? A lot of things we do are good things. Collecting data, analyzing weaknesses, adding supports, things like that. A lot of things that we do are good things. But how to deal with failure is a skill that should be taught. And when you think about it, when you study innovation industries, industries that rely on continuous innovation and research and development, what you find is that almost all innovations are the result of prior learning from failure. That's what SpaceX was doing while they were blowing up rockets. Every failure taught them something that they applied to the next rocket that eventually helped them land them. And since then, let me check my notes here. Since then, I took this stat out of my notes, unfortunately. I think around 48 attempts to land a rocket, 35 have now been successful, 18 of those have been with previously flown rockets. So on at least 18 occasions, SpaceX has now reused a rocket as a result of learning from their failures. But yet in school, oftentimes, if a student is struggling on something, we jump in and help so that they don't have to fail. We're all educators in this room. As part of our basic undergraduate education, we have studied Piaget, and Piaget talks a lot about a disequilibrium and that learning happens when you work to resolve a disequilibrium. Well, here's what happens when you fail at a task. You now are in a state of disequilibrium. And so failing at something is the perfect opportunity to go in and learn. So, I didn't want to just complain. I didn't want to be somebody who just kind of shouts from the corner of the room. I wanted to figure out, what do we do with this? So, like any normal person, I enrolled to get my master's degree. This is what the research says. The study that kind of started this field was by a guy named Manu Kapoor. This was in 2008. And he did a study in a math class. In this math class, they broke the students up into two groups. For the purpose of this presentation, I'll call them the free group and the structured group, and then gave them 2 rounds of problems to solve. In the first round, both groups were given a problem and a goal to work towards. But the structured group was given all of the help that they needed in order to make sure that they were successful at reaching their goal. The free group, they just said, good luck, right? And just kind of let them flounder. So which group do you think was more successful at reaching their goal? Structured group, because they had all the help. Okay? We did whatever it took to make sure the student was successful in that first round. In fact, this chart greatly exaggerates the accomplishment of the free group. Almost nobody in the free group was successful. But here's the interesting thing. Then, when we take those same students in the same groups and put them in another activity, similar, a different activity, but a similar activity before, what we find is interesting. The students that were in the free group in the first round outperformed the students that were in the structured group in the first round. They're learning something. They weren't successful, but they were learning something. So what the researchers in this field would say is that students in the structured group experienced what was called an unproductive success. They were successful at achieving the goal, but they didn't learn much. The students in the free group experienced what was called a productive failure. They were not successful at reaching the goal, but they learned something that gave them an advantage later on. So now, as researchers, this is our problem. What did they learn, and how do we teach it? So the researchers, what they did is they wired the students up with microphones to be able to analyze their conversations while they were talking and figure out what exactly the students in each group were talking about. And the students in the structured group were talking mostly about answer evaluation. When you boil down what they were talking about, it was which of our answers is the right answer. Students in the free group, their conversations were on understanding the problem. Understanding relationships between concepts, understanding the basics, understanding the problem. The literature would say helps them explore the problem space. So this is the difference between the two groups, and then it would seem that to really teach problem-solving skills, we need to teach them how to understand the problem. So how do we do that? Well, really, there's no substitute for experience. We have to be able to get them experience with unstructured problems, experience in doing things with no help, and experiencing failure. So what I've put together here is a method. This is a synthesis of a bunch of researchers that are all kind of separately researching similar things. And I've kind of synthesized that all into this one method. It's called the delayed guidance method. And there are 4 steps here. And I'm going to go through each one of these steps. And this is all the research behind this is in my instructional materials that are listed on the NETA website. And I'll also pull up the link at the end. But the 4 phases here, the teaching phase, the experimentation phase, consolidation phase, and the extension phase. So, and this is not something I'm doing every day, especially in my teaching computer science. I'm kind of supplementing my other curriculum with this. So in the teaching phase, first thing we're doing is it's about 5 to 10 minutes of your lesson, and you're giving just a little bit of background information. You're trying to, we might say, activate prior knowledge. We're trying to review things that we've been learning, review things that we've learned in other lessons that might be applicable to this, but just activate background knowledge is what we're doing for the first 5 to 10 minutes. And then the fun begins. Then we go into the experimentation phase. About 20 minutes or so, we're going to give a collaborative, unstructured, open-ended problem. And then no help whatsoever in trying to solve it. Oftentimes, I make a show of not helping them. I'll go, like dust my file cabinet or something, just to mess with them. I love messing with middle schoolers. That's why I do the things I do. But anyway, a collaborative, unstructured, open-ended problem. And the rule here is that anytime something doesn't work, the only requirement is that we try something else. The only requirement is that we keep trying new things the whole time. If you're not successful at the end of the 20 minutes, that is fine. We're just trying, no giving up allowed, right? We're trying to do new things all the time. Now, let's think about Piaget here, okay? By the end of the 20 minutes, they're going to have questions, right? They're going to be confused about why things didn't work. Oftentimes, they might be really, really frustrated, but that's okay, because that is the disequilibrium that Piaget was talking about. And if they start to develop understandings during this phase that are not actually correct understandings, that's okay too. I'll talk more about that in a minute. But the process of experimenting, even failing, is going to generate questions in your students' minds. Having questions is the important part, because then we come down into the consolidation phase. So now this is where we try to actually develop understandings. So we're going to compare student solutions to either the teacher-generated solutions or the proper solutions. Now keep in mind, this was an open-ended problem, right? So there might be more than one potential solution that works. But the key word here is understand. We are working towards understandings of the concepts. My students, when they come to my class, live in this right answer, wrong answer world. In fact, when we're doing the experimentation phase, my students they will outright beg me to just tell them the right answer. They live in this right answer, wrong answer world, and we're trying to break that. So what we're trying to do here is understand why your solutions didn't work. In fact, in my computer lab, I've got software where I can pull one student's screen up on all the other students' screens. So first thing I'll ask, what were some things you tried that didn't work and you don't understand why they didn't work? And then we'll pull it up, we'll have a class conversation and try to work towards an understanding of why that didn't work. Then we'll show some things that did work. Maybe after 20 minutes, no one in your class got it to work. That's fine, okay? They're generating questions, and then during this, we're going to show the solution, and then we'll discuss why the solution worked. Be careful, not right answer, wrong answer. Understand why some things worked and some things didn't. Then we go on to the extension phase. Now this is kind of your demonstrating mastery phase, okay? We're going to give them another similar problem using the same skills or thinking patterns. And, okay, at some point, they have to be able to demonstrate they can do a skill, right? So here, now we can give assistance. But think back to that study I showed you earlier. In the second round, the students in the free group outperformed the students in the structured group. This now is that second round. So now that we have experimented, now that we've failed, now that we've explored solutions and developed understandings, now we're trying again. This time, bet you your results are going to be better. So you can give assistance in this phase, because like I said, at some point, you got to get going where you're trying to go. But when you're giving assistance, be careful that we're giving assistance in how to explore the problem, because it's all about exploring the problem. All right, so that is your delayed guidance method. So now, you walk into my classroom, and you're going to see 25 highly engaged, enthusiastic 7th graders that are eagerly digging into their work. In fact, the Disney Channel is going to come make a movie about my classroom, right? No, okay? My students hate this. And that's okay, because I'm not doing this every day. And like our speaker said this morning, we're developing relationships. We're trying to, we're developing relationships with students. Your teacher's the most important part. Think of our presenter this morning. It was all good stuff. We're trying to reaffirm to students that they're capable of doing hard things. And like I said with my students, they're coming in this right answer, wrong answer world. And we're trying to break them of that. And that's hard. So when my students are complaining, just give me the right answer, please. Brace yourself. Stay strong. Because this is important. Your students should be coming into your classroom and doing hard things every single day. I tell my students that I am philosophically opposed to them ever doing anything easy in my classroom. In fact, if I find out that something is hard for 24 of you but easy for you, I'm going to try to find a way to make it hard for you. Because we learn by doing hard things. And just as a side note, I'm also philosophically opposed to ever telling a student something's easy. You know, I mean, we've all done it. You know, hey, come on, you can do this, it's easy. First of all, that's called false confidence. If something really is easy, if I'm actually giving them easy things to do, then I'm doing a great disservice to their education. And no matter how easy something really is, there will always be a few students in your classroom for whom nothing is ever easy. And so if all they do is go to school all day long and hear people tell them how easy it is, and for them nothing is easy, then yeah, they're going to internalize, gosh, if this is really easy, then I must be really dumb. So yeah, I'm philosophically opposed to ever telling a student something is easy. We have to learn to struggle. Struggle is a part of the process. Struggle is essential to the process. They won't learn unless they struggle. Here's a story about 7th grade me. This is me acting in my 7th grade play. Okay, my mom made that costume. We were very proud of it. I was the bad guy. I was called Lord Blackhurst. Story about 7th grade me, though. When I was in 7th grade, I took a class called computer art, which was just art class, but we did everything on IMAX because they tried to make us think it was cool. And one day in computer art, I loved it, right? Because being I grew up to be a computer science teacher and a video producer, you know, so I loved it. But the teacher was trying to explain to us how to do an assignment. And I had finished the assignment before the teacher was done explaining it. Any of you have one of those kids in your class? Okay, isn't that annoying? I would have hated to have been my teacher. In fact, like I'm actually Facebook friends with one of my old teachers who I don't think actually liked me very much, and I'll see her name pop up, and I'm like, man, now that I'm a teacher, I think I need to like go back and apologize to her because I didn't make things very easy. But anyway, I finished the assignment before the teacher had finished explaining it. Did I struggle? No. I already knew it. That's why I was able to do it in 2 minutes. So I didn't struggle. I didn't learn anything. I got an A for not learning anything. Struggle is part of the process. Struggle is essential to the process. They won't learn unless they struggle. This is something interesting. Away from school, like I said, run a small video production company. I've written and directed several short films, several stage plays. I got a stage play right now that I'm working on writing and directing. So away from school, I love studying the art of the story. And Pixar has internally these 22 rules of storytelling. You've all seen Pixar films. They manage to make these incredibly deep, profound, moving stories. Here's my favorite one of Pixar's 22 rules. This is rule number 6. What is your character good at? Comfortable with? Throw the polar opposite at them. Challenge them. How do they deal? Let's look at how this plays out in the movie Finding Nemo. During this, you're going to hear me say the word anemone wrong several times. Just pretend I'm saying it right. Well, I'll be good. All right. Marlin and his son Nemo live in an anemone. Anemones are poisonous to everything but clownfish, so they're safe there. And it's important to be safe because it's a big, dangerous ocean, and they've already experienced so much tragedy. Every day, Marlin takes Nemo to school. And then they go home to their anemone. He has to protect his son. Well, one day Nemo gets too curious and, rebelling against his father, leaves the shelter of the reef and gets kidnapped by a dentist. Marlin tries to chase after him, but he's too slow and the boat is too fast, and now, in the middle of the ocean, is far away from the safety of his anemone. He meets up with Dory, who has short-term memory loss. They find the diver's mask and discover that Nemo is probably being held at, you all say it with me, P. Sherman, 42 Wallaby Way, Sydney. It's amazing how a character with short-term memory loss can make everybody remember something. Along the way, they run into fish-eating sharks, strange deep-sea creatures, schools of fish, hungry seagulls, explosive mines, and a hippie turtle who encourages them to do the ultimate scary thing and ride the East Australian current. They jump off the current at Sydney and arrive at P. Sherman 42 Wallaby Way to find that Nemo has already engineered his own escape and is on his way back to the ocean after getting himself flushed down a toilet. After a brief struggle, they reunite, and both of them realize that they are stronger than they thought they were. All right, I'm going to give you an alternate version of the story. You ready? Alternate version. Nemo gets kidnapped by the dentist. Marlin jumps out of the water and says, "Hey, you can't take him, that's my son." The dentist goes, "Oi, sorry mate," because they're Australian, right? "Sorry mate," dumps Nemo back in the water, they swim along, dentist goes off, and they live happily ever after. There's a problem with that story. It's boring, right? When I robbed them of the struggle, I robbed them of their ability to realize that they were stronger than they thought they were. When I rob my students of the opportunity to struggle, I rob them of their ability to realize they can do more than they think. So let's return here to this delayed guidance method. Show you a kind of in practice how this plays out in my class. Anyone use Scratch in here? Okay, cool. Yeah, computer science teachers were pretty familiar with introducing students to computer science through Scratch. So one of the things I'm trying to teach them is how to design an animation. So first, we are here in the teaching phase. 5 to 10 minutes, basic info, activate prior knowledge. So we're reminding them that Scratch is on a coordinate plane. Your y-axis goes up and down, x-axis goes left and right. This is one of the first days we're working in Scratch, by the way. And both these sections of code at the bottom are going to move our character 400 pixels along the x-axis. However, the first one is not an animation, the second one is. An animation is when you do a small motion a bunch of times that repeat. So, first one, not an animation. Second one is an animation. That's what we're trying, that's the basic concept I'm trying to get across. How to design an animation. All right, teaching phase, that was 5 to 10 minutes. Now we go into the experimentation phase. So what I'd like them to do with this is, come on, just get it to go all 4 sides around the screen. They get 20 minutes and no help. And I'll go dust my file cabinets or something. All right, after this, my 7th graders, usually this is like the first week of computer science, 7th grade with me, and usually most of my students, no one gets this in the 20 minutes. They've tried all kinds of numbers of things, but no one's actually gotten this. All right, so then we go into the consolidation phase. And I pull up different computers, I pull up things that people have tried. We try to talk about, my first question. What did you try that didn't work and you don't understand why? And we talk about that. I try to have the students explain to each other why it didn't work, but then I pull up this. This is the way I did it. And we can see here, there's an equation. Your change value times your repeat value equals your distance. So here we're going to start at those coordinates. We're going to go 300 pixels down the y-axis, 400 pixels to the right on the x-axis, 300 pixels up the y-axis, and 400 pixels to the left on the x-axis. That's the consolidation phase. And now 4 is the extension phase. Similar skills, similar thinking patterns. Now we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to travel a different speed on each side. So really it's going to be the same exact code, it's just changing numbers is what they end up realizing by the end of that. So what we're doing here, we are gradually learning to problem solve. We are gradually learning how to fail. We are gradually learning what to do with that. We're giving them a safe place to fail. Now, I want to be clear about something, okay? What I'm not saying is remove all supports and accommodations from special ed students. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying here is we're trying to make a safe place to fail. And I'm going to connect this to innovation industries again. So industries that depend on research and development and innovation, one thing you'll find in the literature over and over and over again is that these industries require a safe place to fail. Their engineers and designers and developers, it has to be safe for them to take risks and fail. And you'll find in the research over and over and over again that in an organization, when it is no longer safe to fail, that company stops being innovative. That happens over and over and over again. So what we're doing here is we're making a safe place for students to fail. And in doing so, we're going to help develop a mindset of curiosity and a mindset of persistence. Because curiosity and failure go hand in hand. The Wright brothers were not afraid to fail. The Wright brothers invented the airplane because they were curious. You see, here's what I'm afraid is going to happen, or happens too often, is that a student encounters a stream. And instead of teaching them how to cross the stream, sometimes we're too quick to just build a bridge over it so that they can get across it. And then the streams get bigger, so we'll build them a bigger bridge. And the streams get bigger, and we'll build them bigger bridges, but all the while, they've always crossed the stream, but they've never actually learned how to cross the stream. And then one day, they're going to come across a canyon, and on the other side is going to be something big and bold and wonderful, and they're not even going to try to cross it, because if they've never actually learned to cross a stream, how are they going to cross a canyon? We're trying to create safe places for them to learn to fail and experiment and be creative. And be persistent. I've got a bunch of students, my first week in 7th grade, students will say, "I can't do this, I'm dumb." First of all, how do you know you can't do it? You've been doing computer science for 1 week. This is the first thing I've ever tried to make you do. How do you know you can't do it? Second of all, really what we need is persistence. So let's watch a short, it's about a 3-minute documentary here on the Wright brothers and the process that they went through. This is something I produced for another educational production I was working on.
You've probably heard the story of the Wright brothers. Oliver and Wilbur Wright, bicycle builders from Ohio who traveled to Kitty Hawk, North Carolina in December of 1903 and flew the first airplane. But they didn't just show up at Kitty Hawk with an airplane and fly it. What they built was the result of a several-year process that followed a plan, similar to chunking. Other inventors working on flight thought there was no way a human could control an aircraft, and tried to build an aircraft that flew on their own. But the Wright brothers had a lot of experience with bicycles, and they thought that if humans could learn to control a bicycle, they could learn to control an aircraft. But they realized they needed to learn a few things. How wings generate lift. How much lift did they need? How to control the pitch. How to control the yaw. How to control the roll. How to make a propeller. First, they contacted the Smithsonian Institution to ask for research on airplanes to answer their questions about lift. Then, in 1899, they built a kite to test out different methods of controlling pitch, yaw, and roll. Only after they had perfected this kite did they travel to Kitty Hawk, but not with an airplane, with a glider. And before they put people in their gliders, they tried them as kites. In 1900, they traveled to Kitty Hawk with their first glider. Although it flew, it only generated about half the lift they had predicted. So they went back home and revisited their plan. In 1901, they returned to Kitty Hawk with a glider that had larger wings, but it was also disappointing. It had far less lift than they predicted, and the steering behaved unpredictably. When they went home, They found their book that gave them equations on how much lift the wings generated. They tested the equations in a wind tunnel they built themselves, and they found the equations were wrong. They rewrote the equations and built a new glider. They also installed a new vertical rudder to correct some of their control issues. They took their improved glider to Kitty Hawk in 1902. They tested their new glider with nearly 1,000 test flights and were finally happy with the performance. It was now time to build a propeller, install an engine, and make a powered flight. Finally, in 1903, they returned to Kitty Hawk for the 4th time. On December 17th, they powered up the engine, took off, and flew for 12 seconds and 120 feet. The first powered flight.
The Wright brothers were persistent. They knew the importance of failing, and they went to Kitty Hawk year after year after year, knowing that they would fail, but planning to learn from it. And where would we be today if they didn't, and they weren't willing to do so? Failure is not an option? No. Failure is always an option. Failure is never a stopping point. Every day, make your students do hard things. Find out what they're good at and throw the polar opposite at them. Make their failures productive, and they'll learn so much more. Thank you. And I can take questions on the delayed guidance method, or if you want to come up and ask questions, if you need to look at the NETA clue, that's fine too. But thank you for coming today. Thank you.